Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe and support me. The world had long forgotten the warmth of the sun. For centuries, the eternal night had gripped the earth in its cold, merciless grasp. The moon hung low, casting an eerie silver light over a land once filled with life, now shrouded in fear and darkness. The human cities, or what was left of them, lay huddled under the rule of vampires, their towering spires looming over the cobbled streets like prison guards. Beyond the cities, in the wild lands, the werewolves roamed, patrolling the forests and highlands, their primal howls piercing the night, a constant reminder of their dominion. Bella stood at the broken window of the old government building, staring out into the distance. Her reflection, faint and ghostly in the cracked glass, revealed the lines of exhaustion etched into her face. She had been president for 5 years now, though the title felt hollow, almost laughable. There was no real power left for humans, no freedom, no hope. Yet, the weight of leadership pressed down on her every moment, every breath. "Madam President," came a voice from the door. Bella turned to see Elias, her closest ally, and commander of the human resistance. His dark eyes mirrored the same fatigue she carried, but there was still a spark in him, a flicker of hope that refused to die. "The council is waiting. They need to hear from you." She nodded, tearing her gaze away from the night beyond the window. It was always night. She had grown up under its heavy sky, the stories of sunlight and warmth like distant dreams. But now, those dreams felt more like chains, keeping them anchored to a past they would never see again. As she walked down the dim corridor, the weight of what she was about to do settled in her chest. Her steps echoed in the cold, empty halls, once bustling with life, now filled with the silence of despair. The few remaining humans who served the resistance gathered in the underground council chamber, a hidden bunker far below the surface, safe from the eyes of their oppressors. Elias followed her closely, a silent guardian. He had been with her since the beginning, through every failed rebellion, every massacre that had crushed their hopes. But now, the time for rebellion was over. What she had planned was something far greater, far more final. In the chamber, the council members rose as she entered, a mix of men and women, each bearing the scars of a lifetime spent fighting for survival. Some were missing limbs, others had burns or jagged wounds that never fully healed. They were the last of the human leadership, and their desperation was palpable. President Bella, one of the council members, an older woman named Mara, spoke. Her voice was rough, worn from years of shouting orders on the battlefield. "We've received word from the vampire lords. They refuse to negotiate. Lucian's forces are tightening their grip on the northern cities and the werewolves. They've begun hunting the remaining villages in the south." Bella nodded, her face expressionless. She had expected this. The vampires and werewolves had no reason to negotiate, no reason to fear. Humanity had been broken, beaten into submission over generations. And yet, despite it all, she had one final card to play. "The time for negotiations is over," Bella said, her voice calm but heavy with finality. "There is only one way left to free our people." The room fell silent. Elias, standing by her side, knew what was coming. He had been the first she had old, and even now, he looked at her with a mix of respect and grief. "What are you suggesting?" Mara asked, though there was something in her tone that suggested she already knew the answer. Bella took a deep breath. "I'm suggesting that we end this once and for all. I have studied the ancient texts, the prophecies that speak of the eternal night. There is a way to break it, but it requires a sacrifice." A murmur spread through the room. The council members exchanged uneasy glances, but none of them interrupted. They trusted her, but they feared the unknown. "It requires my life," Bella continued, her voice steady. "There is an ancient magic, passed down through the bloodline of the first humans who fought against the darkness. It is a power older than the vampires and the werewolves, a power strong enough to break the bonds that hold us in this eternal night." Elias shifted beside her, his jaw tight. He had tried to talk her out of this plan, but she had been resolute. "Bella, There must be another way, he had argued before. But now, standing before the council, he knew it was too late for arguments. "What you're suggesting is madness," Mara said, her voice rising. "You can't just sacrifice yourself and expect everything to change. The vampires, the werewolves, they won't stop hunting us. They'll only grow more desperate, more violent." "I'm not asking for your permission," Bella replied, her gaze unwavering. "I'm telling you what must be done. If we continue to fight as we have, more humans will die. We don't have the numbers, the resources. But if I can tip the balance, if my death can weaken Thema, it will give us a fighting chance." The room fell into a tense silence. Mara looked ready to argue further, but another council member, a man named Jareth, spoke up. "I don't like this any more than the rest of you." "But Bella's right. We can't keep fighting the way we've been. The vampires and werewolves will tear us apart, bit by bit. If there's even a chance that this can give us an edge, we have to take it." Bella gave a small nod of gratitude to Jareth, then turned back to the others. "You have all given more than anyone should ever be asked to give. I won't force this on you, but I believe this is the only way. My death will be the beginning of our liberation." Elias stepped forward. "If Bella goes through with this, we need to be ready. We need to strike when the vampires and werewolves are reeling from the shock. We've been preparing for this moment for years. Now's our chance to hit them hard and take back what's ours." The council members exchanged uneasy glances, but one by one, they nodded in agreement. They had nothing left to lose. Bella stood at the edge of the old churchyard, the cold wind tugging at her cloak. The night was darker here, the moon obscured by heavy clouds. This place, once a sanctuary for humans, had become a ruin, long abandoned after the first vampire raids. The stone walls were cracked and covered in vines, the gravestones half buried under years of neglect. But beneath the earth, buried deep in the catacombs, lay the key to humanity's salvation. Elias stood beside her, silent. He hadn't said much since the council meeting, but she could feel his disapproval like a weight on her chest. She had known Elias for years, so he had been her protector, her confidant. He had fought alongside her in every battle, seen her through every loss. But now, he could not protect her from what she had chosen. "You don't have to do this," he said finally, his voice rough. "I do," Bella replied, her breath fogging in the cold air. "There's no other way." "You're asking me to let you die." "I'm asking you to let humanity live." Elias clenched his fists, his face hard. "I've followed you through everything. I've watched you make impossible decisions. But this feels like giving up." "It's not giving up," Bella said softly. "It's giving us a chance to be free." Elias turned away, staring out at the ruins of the church. The silence between them stretched, thick with unspoken words. Finally, Bella reached out, resting a hand on his arm. "When I'm gone, you'll lead them. You'll finish what we started." He didn't look at her, but she saw the muscle in his jaw tighten. "You always knew you were meant for more than this, Elias. You were meant to lead." "I was meant to protect you," he whispered, and for a moment, his voice broke. Bella closed her eyes, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. She had made her choice, and now she had to see it through. "Promise me," she said quietly, "that you'll see this through." Elias stood silent for a long moment before nodding. "I promise." Beneath the church, in the damp, cold catacombs, Bella stood alone before the ancient altar. The stone was smooth, worn from centuries of use, and at its center lay a single, jagged knife, an artifact from the time before the eternal night. Bella's heart pounded in her chest as she picked up the blade. It was heavier than she expected, cold against her skin. She had been preparing for this moment, but now that it was here, the weight of it felt overwhelming. But she couldn't hesitate. She had to be strong, for her people, for humanity. She had to believe that her death would be more than just another casualty in this endless war. Bella gripped the blade tightly in her hand, the sharp edge gleaming in the dim light of the catacombs. Her pulse echoed in her ears, a reminder that she was still alive, still standing, Even as she prepared to sever that thread herself, the stone beneath her feet felt cold, unyielding, but the purpose burning inside her was hotter than any fire she had ever known. There could be no hesitation now. Her sacrifice would mean humanity's freedom. This was the only way. She knelt before the altar, the ancient carvings of humanity's past warriors etched into the stone surrounding her, a silent witness to the moment that would change everything. Her breath came in slow, measured exhales as she lifted the knife above her heart, eyes closing in acceptance. She whispered a final prayer, though not to any gods those had abandoned this world long ago, but to the people she loved, the ones who would carry on without her. Her thoughts lingered on Elias, the last person who truly understood the burden she carried. She hoped he would forgive her one day. She hoped he would see the world change and know that her sacrifice wasn't in vain. The cold steel of the knife touched her chest, a sting of pain that jolted through her, but before she could drive the blade into her heart, a sudden surge of power filled the air. Her eyes snapped open as the catacombs began to tremble. The altar beneath her feet groaned as the magic, ancient and untamed, awakened all around her. Bella gasped, dropping the knife as the ground cracked open at the base of the altar. A blinding light shot up from the fissure, bathing the room in an unnatural glow. It was as if the very essence of the earth was reacting to her decision, recognizing the gravity of what was about to be unleashed. She stumbled backward, her mind racing. The prophecy had spoken of a great power that would rise to meet the one willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, but no one had described what it would feel like to stand in its presence. It was as if the entire universe had turned its gaze on her, waiting for her next move. Through the light, Bella saw the shadows of the ancient warriors etched into the walls begin to stir. The carvings twisted and writhed, the figures coming to life as the energy in the room swelled. The faces of the warriors turned toward her, their expressions grave, their eyes burning with an intensity that made her heart race. And then, without warning, the light burst outward, slamming into her chest with the force of a tidal wave. Bella cried out, her body lifted from the ground as the power surged into her, filling every fiber of her being with raw, untamable energy. It was as if she had become one with the night itself, with the very darkness she had spent her life fighting. She landed hard on the stone floor, gasping for breath. The energy swirled around her, the room still glowing with its brilliance, but she could feel something else, too, a presence, a consciousness that was both within her and beyond her. "You are the one who will bring the dawn," a voice echoed in her mind, deep and resonant, a voice that seemed to belong to the earth itself. "But your sacrifice will not be enough." Bella's chest heaved as she struggled to understand what was happening. "What do you mean?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "The balance has already begun to tip. The world is ready for change, but it will not come without a cost." "I know the cost," she said, her voice growing steadier. "I'm ready to give my life." The presence surged within her, and for a moment, Bella felt as though she was standing at the edge of an abyss, staring into something far greater than herself. "Your life will open the door," the voice said. "But once it is open, it cannot be closed. The darkness will fight back with all its fury. You must ensure that humanity is ready." Bella's heart pounded in her chest. She had known there would be a price, but she hadn't expected the full weight of it to fall on her shoulders in this way. The prophecy had spoken of sacrifice, of blood, but it hadn't spoken of the war that would follow. A war that would consume the night. She lowered her head, gripping the stone floor beneath her fingers as the power continued to pulse through her body. "I understand," she whispered. The presence receded, the light around her dimming, and Bella found herself lying on the cold stone once more. But she was not the same. The ancient magic now coursed through her veins, and with it came the knowledge of what she must do. Her sacrifice would be the beginning, but it would not be the end. There would be no simple victory, no peaceful resolution. The night was about to erupt into chaos, and humanity would have to fight harder than ever before to survive. She stood, her legs shaky but determined. The knife still lay on the floor at her feet, but now it seemed small, insignificant. The real battle was no longer between her and her death, it was between the forces that had ruled the night for centuries and the humans who had been their prey. With one final glance at the altar, Bella turned and made her way back up to the surface, her heart heavy with the weight of what was to come. Elias would be waiting, and he would need to know the truth. This wasn't just about ending the oppression, this was about ensuring humanity was prepared for the war that would follow. As she emerged from the catacombs, the cold wind hit her face, and the dark sky stretched endlessly above her. But this time, she didn't feel the familiar sense of hopelessness that had always accompanied the sight. This time, she felt the stirrings of something new, a purpose, a power. Elias was waiting for her, his face tight with worry. "Did it work?" he asked, his voice low. Bella met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "I've unlocked the power," she said. "But it's not what we thought." He frowned, stepping closer. "What do you mean?" "The sacrifice. It's only the beginning. The darkness won't let go so easily. There's a war coming, Elias. A war we have to be ready for." Elias's eyes widened, but he didn't falter. "Then we'll be ready." Bella nodded, the weight of the future pressing down on her. There was no turning back now. The power of the eternal night was stirring, and soon, the world would be engulfed in a battle that would decide the fate of all humanity. The vampire lord, Lucian, stood at the edge of his fortress, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. He had felt the shift, the tremor in the magic that bound the night to his will. Something had changed, to something that unsettled even him, though he would never admit it. The balance that had kept the vampires and werewolves in power was teetering, and he knew that a storm was coming. His hand tightened around the hilt of his sword as he sensed a figure approaching from behind. Without turning, he spoke, his voice as cold as the night air. "Fenrir." The werewolf Alpha stepped forward, his massive form casting a long shadow over the ground. His yellow eyes glowed with the same intensity they always did, but there was an unease in them that even Lucian could sense. "You felt it too," Fenrir growled. Lucian nodded, his lips curling into a slight sneer. "The human woman has done something reckless." "Reckless or not, it's affecting us," Fenrir snapped, baring his fangs. "We need to deal with her before things spiral out of control." Lucian turned to face the werewolf, his eyes narrowing. "And how do you propose we do that? The humans have been little more than insects beneath our feet for centuries. But now, something is different. The night itself is shifting." "Then we crush them," Fenrir said, his voice filled with a growl that echoed through the night. "We crush every last one of them before they can rise against us." Lucian's gaze flickered with amusement. "And you think that will be enough?" "This is not a simple rebellion, Fenrir. This is something much more dangerous. The magic of the night has been disturbed, and when magic shifts, so does power." Fenrir snarled, pacing restlessly. "So what do you suggest? We sit here and wait for the humans to overrun us?" Lucian's eyes glinted in the pale moonlight. "No," he said softly. "We prepare for war, but not just any war. We strike at the heart of their power, and we make sure that when this is over, there is nothing left of their kind." Bella stood before the gathered human forces, her heart swelling with both fear and determination. The ancient magic inside her hummed, a constant reminder of the power she now carried. The power that had once seemed like her doom was now her weapon. She raised her hand, and the murmurs of the crowd fell silent. "The time has come," she said, her voice carrying across the field. "The vampires and werewolves will not let us go easily. But we are no longer their prey. We have the strength, the will, and the power to take back our world." Elias stood beside her, his face set in grim determination. He had already begun organizing the troops, making sure they were ready for what was to come. But Bella knew that no matter how well they prepared, this would be a fight unlike any they had ever faced. "Tonight," she continued, "we fight not just for ourselves, but for every human who has been oppressed, every life that has been lost. We fight for our future, and we will win." The crowd erupted into cheers, but Bella's mind was already on the battle ahead. She could feel the night shifting, the darkness gathering like a storm. The vampires and werewolves were preparing for war, and the humans were walking into the heart of it. As the first howls echoed through the distant hills, Bella knew that the final battle had begun.